Muchachos amigos, and welcome to Record Breakers, a music podcast. I've got something to say. I killed a monster today. Like Norman Reedus. I'm Petey Rave. I've left my BB over on the other side. Here with me is my team, my squad, my BTs, my connection to the world of death. I don't know. It turned into a Misfits quote, then it turned into a Death Stranding metaphor. I don't know where I'm going. Here with me is my crew, my squad. We've got David.
Do you wanna bang heads with me?
Mm-hmm. We've got Drew.
I'm not singing.
And of course, we've got Brett.
Hey, you think these guys like horror movies?
I think
No.
maybe. I don't know.
With
They're big.
with Vincent Price.
Yes. Movies.
I just
I
thought
already
of-
did the laugh
could we
once.
have-
I'm not doing the laugh from Thriller again.
You can do some punk rock. Oohs. Yeah, 'cause that's my favorite thing.
I was going to say I think they're into rom-coms, and then that made me think, what would a punk rock band that took rom-com tropes be like instead of taking horror and sci-fi tropes? And I don't know.
Isn't that
what you
emo?
would do.
What
Isn't
era
that
of
emo?
rom-com?
More like
'Cause
pop punk.
Correct me if I'm wrong. Is that not emo?
Emo is
no,
more like Zach
rom-coms
Braff
eventually
movies.
get happy.
yes, and it's about adults.
Emo's always crying. Rom-coms have an act 3 that goes upwards.
Ah.
See, that's why we're thinking rom-coms is more pop punk. Emo is more Zach Braff movies.
What if those two collide?
Yes. We're gonna talk about an album. of
Set your
course.
goals.
Yes. We're gonna talk about an album this week, of course, like we do every week. Well, not every week, but almost every week. We're talking about an album. The provider of the album this week is Brett. Brett, what have you brought for us this week?
I got a little bit of romance,
Little bit of the
little bit of-
bubbly.
a little bit of comedy. I brought the Misfits album Static Age. You know, the one that kind of didn't exist and then it did exist, but it came in the Thing, or then later you could buy it outside of the Thing, but before that it was on a bunch of things. Yeah, that one.
Yeah. Let's talk about expectations, which I think we probably all have some. David, what expectations did you have coming into this album?
It's really hard to answer this question when it's kind of something you already have a pretty respectably less than minuscule knowledge of. I got exactly what I expected from this album, from the Misfits. It's pretty much, for all intents and purposes, this was meant to be their debut album. And when you say what would have been the debut album from the Misfits, you generally have an idea. There will be something punk rocky. There will be some lyrics that might upset some people that are boring, and it's that.
Oh, the
It's that.
recording quality? Yeah, that's the best. Highest.
Well, see, I was
going
gonna be nice. I was gonna be nice about it.
He was saying it upsets boring people.
Yes.
Drew, what were your expectations coming into this album?
Again, it's weird saying expectations going into an album when it's a band you've seen. Well, maybe not this incarnation of. Because I didn't live when this incarnation was a thing, and they are never getting back together.
And they were younger than you when they made this. God, that's scary.
Yeah. But I've seen an incarnation of this band before, playing a lot of these songs, actually. So, more than once. I think 3 or 4 times, because they used to do like a yearly Halloween show in Cleveland. Halloween show. But they're a band that I'm pretty familiar with. going back and sort of seeing the origin, quote unquote, even though this came out 15 years later, is really interesting from a conceptual standpoint. So I was excited to do that. But yeah, no, as I say, we are all 138 here, so I think we sort of knew what we. But
yeah, I had an idea of what I was getting into. Even from I was aware of the Misfits ever since Jerry Only showed up on Monday Nitro to wrestle Dr. Death Steve Williams in a steel cage.
Wow.
Thanks
So,
to Vampiro.
Did you guys know somebody who had the box set? Because that's like my cultural punk rock. Like there's always like the one friend in the group of punk rock kids who paid the $100 to buy the Coffin Misfits box set that this came in, and then like he'd go and find somebody with a CD burner in like 1999, and like then you'd be like, oh great, I've got the bests of. And you'd be like, which one is this? And then you'd put it in. You'd be like, oh shit, Evil Live. And then the next one, and you'd be like, yeah.
I didn't have any of that. No, I didn't have any of that.
I didn't know that. That's
I was the one that was. I was the one that was into punk rock enough to get the box set, but I always stole my music.
I mean, you can download this at 96K. So. 96K sounds just fine.
Yes.
Like the lowest fidelity, you're all right.
The lo-fi movement. Let's talk about let's get into this high quality lo-fi music.
192 minimum.
Yes. Brett, how would you describe this album musically? What would be the themes elements that pop up?
I mean, I'll describe it as what it isn't. It's not drum fills and pick slides and fuck the man. It's not that kind of punk rock, which there's not a whole lot of this that exists in that era. It's odd, vulgar songs about horror movies with howling vocals and 1970s era punk rock lyrics that, they don't quite make them like that anymore. Yes, as we said, it sounded like it was recorded in a tin can, and the vocals are barely enunciated. It's more along the lines of Fresh Fruit for Rotten Vegetables by the Dead Kennedys than, let's say, Bad Religion Suffer. It's that early, like, we're singing about things in a way, and we're still figuring out what this genre is going to be thing, which is kind of cool. Late 70s punk rock is weird, and I like it that way. It's not an album that's like, fuck the man. There's no resistance being sung about. It's some guys being weirdos and with bad haircuts, recording it live in a room all together on a budget, singing about things that Glenn Danzig wrote. Go figure.
Yes. Right now the only one fucking the man is Seth Rollins. David, how would you describe this album musically?
I felt like this was, in a weird way, simultaneously very retro, while also being ahead of its time. It felt like these guys were onto something that maybe really didn't make sense until 15 years later when it actually came out. As I was looking up at this, Glenn Danzig really worked his ass off to try and get them a record deal, and it didn't really work out for them with this. And I can kind of understand why. Because for this time, even for punk rock, this was really kind of out there. And I get why it works, but I also get why it didn't work at the time. But I feel like there's some quality here, recording aside. You hear Glenn Danzig his voice already being very distinctive, his ability to sing notes is definitely prevalent, and it feels like there is something here. You get that with debut albums from bands that really stand the test of time on their first output, where you know that there's something there.
Drew, how would you describe this album musically?
Well, the cool thing about this one, right, going backwards, and this being, like I said, it didn't release much later, but it was sort of the first album they put together as a group. And going back to that, what struck me odd was the Misfits are the guys that started horror punk, really. And like Brett said, it was in a time where you were still figuring out what punk rock really meant, right? This takes much more, in my opinion, from the punk rock side of things than the horror side of things. Whereas later, they would get into more of using more musical tropes from horror movies and sci-fi movies. Whereas this took much more from the punk rock that was happening around them and added some of the chords and such that you would hear in a horror movie, and then adding in the lyrics, which at times were really outrageous. The things of monsters and rape and murder and things of that nature. Assassinations, which I'm sure we'll get into, which was just something that was like, to me, it's weird to say cool because a lot of those things aren't cool per se, but to sing about them in a fictional setting.
What?
Yeah.
To sing about them in a fictional setting is cool. Yes.
But
there's
definitely
something cool
schlocky.
about that. Like, and that's why you go to horror movies, right? Is like the pushing the envelope on what's acceptable. And I think this does that in a really cool way. And it's tongue firmly in cheek most of the time, where it's they are obviously doing this as a send up to B-grade horror and science fiction, and that's cool. There's not much about the musicality that stands out a lot. It's a punk band. There's some cool stuff there, but again, it is some guys that wanted to have some fun and liked a certain group of things. I wish they would have maybe got along a little better for the long run. But hopefully the tour that they do, because I think that the band is at its best when it's Danzig and Jerry, but that's me, I guess.
Yeah.
They seem to dick around more than Glenn Danzig would have liked.
Yeah.
That's the impression that I was getting.
They did have that whole reunion thing.
It's a different album.
Yeah.
Impression that I get is a ska album.
Yeah, this album is fun in a kind of like schlocky classic way. It is not high fidelity, but it is high attitude. It is personality galore, and I think that translates really well. You get Danzig starting to find out what Danzig is, and before you fully develop that vocally, and it's really cool, and it's fun to listen to. Let's talk about some of the key tracks, because this has some memorable ones and some well-known ones, some classics. Brett, what would be some of the key tracks for you?
So, the songs of a bunch of kids from New Jersey coming up in their room. Last Caress. They've got something to say. You may know this from that one Metallica cover. That's not Am I Evil, because that's the good one. But this is like you go to punk rock night every Friday or Saturday at a dive bar. Somebody's playing this as a cover, probably with a horn. But like it's been done in every way. Last Caress. It's a standard.
How would you do this with a horn?
Well, that's how. You know, yes, you get that. Like, get your chops. Like Hybrid Moments, I enjoy that song a whole lot. I think a lot of this album came at a time when I was like learning how to play music, and I was like, oh, this punk rock stuff's easy. Kind of like the last album we reviewed. Hey, you learned one of them, you got about all of them. You don't even have
You're ready for Richard Henschel.
I mean, you know, it's punk rock. Like Cheech says, you don't have to be good, you just got to be a punk. Like Hybrid
They
Moments,
all knew 7 chords and used 3 of them at a time, so it was fine.
I mean, Jerry only joined the band like 2 days after getting a bass, like, you know, something like that. Like he didn't even know what to do with it. So like it's great, and you know, like I'm all in on this. Like it's about effort put in, and instead of quality that comes out. But Hybrid Moments is a very short song. It's very fun. It's one of my favorite Misfits songs. And I like the way that this album closes out in the doorway. It's like it's like Mumble Danzig at its finest. It's you know, it's a great way to bookend a really weird album that goes everywhere from, you know, talking about JFK, you know, timely. It's like there's a lot of old shit in this album. It's very 1978.
Yes. David, what would be some of the key tracks for you?
I'm just going to go ahead and mention We Are 138 because you hear this song, and even though it's only 1 minute and 41 seconds long, you hear what would have birthed punk and thrash metal. You hear the embryonic nucleus of thrash metal in that song. Also, Angel Fuck. I enjoyed that one. The entire album was probably more an album of moments here and there, simply because the entire thing from start to finish is samey to a degree. But there are moments, and there are songs that are really enjoyable, and I would say We Are 138 is definitely a high point.
Mm-hmm. Drew, what would be some of the key tracks for you?
Some kind of heat. Staccato thumpy bass is gonna catch my ears most days. Last Caress, again, sometimes there is just a song that defines a band. To me, Last Caress is that. It is one of the horror punk anthems. It is the vocal range that's shown, the speed, the lyrics, it all feels right in the correct wheelhouse. We Are 138. I want to mention that because while it's good as hell, I still don't know if anybody's ever come out and said definitively what the hell the song is supposed to be about.
I think
There's
about,
the
like,
TA
androids and stuff like that, and like evil.
Right, and there was, in researching it, I was like, okay, I'm gonna definitively say, okay, what is the 138? I'm gonna figure that out.
So it's also a Meshuggah song. Along with thrash metal, it's a Meshuggah song. They're talking about robots.
There was 3. Well, yeah, there's 3 different places that mentioned that in like an email that was sent out in 1996 from the Misfits Bible. Jerry mentions that they had pins made of androids with 138 on their heads, and that they always felt that it was a reference to THX 113, one of George Lucas's first movies, about people being turned into robots. Danzig, about 4 years later, came out in an interview and said, I wrote the damn song, and I never told them what it was about. It was about violence. I don't know who's right in this regard, but it's a damn good song. And a song that we definitely do know what it's about, Bullet. the way the song comes in very abruptly, with the subject matter that is there, being very abrupt, in what happened, I think is really cool. I think it's one of, like, in my opinion, the more hidden gems. Like, everybody knows, like, Last Caress and 138 and stuff like that, but, like, Bullet, I think, is one of those songs that's just absolutely fantastic.
Masturbate me.
Yeah.
Great lyrics, let me tell you.
Yes. I will say give it.
That's at King Kaz on Twitter, everybody. At
Exactly.
King Kaz.
I want to give a shout out to a song like TV Casualty, because I like the idea of like having this song in the 70s about losing your brains to TV, television, and things like that. Again, it's one of those time is a flat circle things. It's like those kids and their TV, those kids and their phones and their Nintendos. Time is a flat circle. And another really cool song, Teenagers from Mars. It's just fun.
I don't care.
I don't care. Yeah. China don't care. Teenagers from Mars is a fun catchy song.
China cares a lot, actually.
Yeah,
Come to find out.
Yes.
Time is not a flat circle.
Time is a weebly wobbly timey wimey ball. You all know that. Let's bring it back around the horn. Talk about some conclusive thoughts on this album. David, what will be your conclusion on this album as a whole?
I would say that despite everything else about this album clearly not quite being ready for prime time, Glenn Danzig's talent really shines through. It really, really did for me. I'm not going to give them the it's punk rock pass. A lot of this is really, dare I say, amateurish. And I want to... I know the Misfits got better. They did. And...
Better is a strong word.
They improved. They improved. But I feel like this was, I would, like I said at the beginning, it was clearly their first output, and you saw little flashes of quality, but they were few and far between, and it clearly showed that maybe they weren't quite fully ready for prime time. Not quite.
Yeah. Drew, what would be your conclusion on this album as a whole?
This is one of those albums where there's a lot of pieces that came later. As recording got cheap, the fidelity got better-ish. In spot. I don't know if I would say any Misfits album was ever like supremely produced or anything like that. Like, let's not. But it tightened up a bit. The mix is better, and I think DJ's right. It got a little tighter in spots later on as the band sort of grew and different members came in and stuff like that. But what I like from this is how early it is in punk rock. Like Brett said at the beginning, this is sort of like what, 77, 78 when this was, the bulk of this was recorded. And punk as a term was just starting to be used in terms of music. Like, just starting to get its foot in the door. So it was something that nobody really knew what was going to come of these bands or what it was going to coalesce around. And I think there's something really cool about that. There's something really seeing that and being able to jump back in time a bit is a really cool feeling. On top of that, you get to see the band before they became the band. And people I know that aren't like super into punk rock, this is one of those names you mention, and they're like, it rings true to a lot of people. It's the Bad Religions, it's the Dead Kennedys. Like, oh, okay. Like, even though a lot of people might not know who it is, they've at least heard the name, and it's like, oh, those guys are supposed to be really good. Those guys have been around forever, sorts of things. And to hear them this early is kind of a neat thing. It's cool to do. Again, not the first Misfits album I'm going to throw on if I'm looking to convert somebody into listening to punk rock necessarily, but a good thing nonetheless to know your punk rock roots, as it were.
Yes. Deep learning. Yeah, this is a fun like little sojourn into the history of punk rock. Obviously, we've Earth 80 Wolf's Blood is a slightly better
Yes,
album.
Good, great album, probably their best.
Yeah. But this is still a fun kind of like exploration to experience. And it overall, I'm glad we took the time to bring it forth. Brett, finally, what would be your conclusion on this album as a whole?
We kind of had to do this. I remember when I brought Earth AD, our former cast member, the swagger himself, was like, "Oh, Static Age. I'm like, "Fuck that, Earth AD." It's been like half a decade. It's time for Static Age. It's it's an album that has things that we can talk about. It is an important album to me personally. I made paper mache masks for 9th grade drama class, like the first time I was listening to this front to back, in ways other than cassette tapes and the like vehicles of friends that were older. It's an important album, like musically. It like, honestly, it's like, where would we be without Danzig's mother? Like, as a humanity, like, he had to do something first, and this was it, in recorded form for the entire world to get in 1996. Yeah. So it's a good time. Like, it's definitely something that they don't make anymore. And even when they were making this stuff, it weren't this. This was not the Jerry Only, the middle-aged wrestler. This was a bunch of kids from New Jersey, and this is kind of a fun thing that's that weird early East Coast punk rock that everybody's asking for, and we're bringing it.
Yes, we're bringing it good. Let's get down now. Those are our thoughts on Misfits. Now let's get down to the nitty gritty of our main event of the evening, the moment we've all been waiting for, the haiku reviews. Where we sum it all up in poetic form. Let's get it poppin'. Now tell me, can you hang?
Let's get it started in here.
Let's call our friends the Insane Clown Posse to be in their film.
Yes.
Let us
do some art.
Let's go hang out with Vampiro. Yes. Haiku reviews. David, what is your haiku?
It's pretty clear that Glenn Danzig had the talent, but it's very raw.
Mm-hmm. Drew, what is your haiku?
Royalty begins. Wish they kept it together. Really fun music.
Mm-hmm. My haiku. It's got attitude, with schlocky spookums galore, a short and fun ride. Brett, what is your haiku?
Greasy Devilocks, or East Coast punk rock, werewolf bar mitzvah.
Yeah. That's of course our thoughts on Misfits, Static Age. You can, of course, check it out on our Spotify playlist. Play Record Breakers, the home game. Do your due diligence and your dude diligence, as it were. Following along at home. On that Spotify playlist will be next week's record. And it'll be my turn again. I'm doing an album that I kind of have been holding on for when Brett came back. I don't know, because I think like he would dig on it. And just for some reason, I feel like he would be interested. It was a group that I was introduced to by witnessing them perform at Japan Night over at South by Southwest, hanging out with our buddy Roberto Villegas, and their performance really kind of impressed me and blew me away, and they were pretty fantastic. It is a trio of Japanese teenagers doing instrumental epic heavy metal. Also, there's a cameo by Bootsy Collins.
Petey?
Oh,
Petey?
hey.
You had my curiosity, but now you have my attention. Who is this?
This is Asterism with their song with their album Ignition. So look forward to that. Let's get some licks.
The song Ignition is something different. That's hot and fresh out the kitchen.
Yeah, that's a song of Predator, but that's neither here nor there.
But it's somewhere.
But that will be next week, and this is this week, and you can of course find us all over the internet. David is at Call Me DJM. Drew is at XTruciferX. Brett is at HibbityBirbird, HIBBITYBIBBARD. I'm PD Rave. The show is at 4 Record Breakers. That's the number 4 Record Breakers. RecordBreakersPodcast.com. RecordBreakersPodcast@gmail.com. Rebelli.net for this and other shows. Rebelli TV on YouTube. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, SoundCloud. I have to double check I uploaded the last episode on SoundCloud. Find us everywhere you find podcasts. Like, share, subscribe, do all the things. Until next time, hasta los huevos.
Cacaw.
Jesus!
Diamond Club hopes you have enjoyed this program.